Investigative reporter Martin Groth is the author of A National Suicide. That's his book, How Washington is Destroying the American Dream from A to Z. And Martin, welcome back to the 700 Club.
Thank you. It's always good to be with you, Mark.
Listen, suicide, is this true, and how soon will the suicide take place?
Well, we're right in the midst of it. We have the razor blade right at our throat. And the result of many years of wasteful spending and of not paying attention to money. It's as if we had a credit card. It's so bad that we have 1,399 federal programs just for the rural areas. Some of them are 70 years old. They're not cataloged. No one has any idea how much money they spend, and it goes up every year.
You mean to tell me that there's almost 1,400 programs about rural areas
alone,
and people don't even know what they are?
As a matter of fact, the Federal Home Loan Bank Board spent some money for a study because no one knew how many, and they found out, and they say that's useless because they're all conflicting. No one knows where they are. We have 27 programs for teenage pregnancy, 50 for the homeless. We have thousands of duplicative programs throughout the country. And they're not cataloged because the congressman passed the bill, get the publicity, and then forget about it. And it's gone. There's no sunset. And we must have 10,000 programs. Now, in welfare, for example, I found out that there are 86, not one, but 86 different welfare programs, uncatalogued, not computerized, and it's $65,000 for every poor family in America. But of course, they don't get the $65,000. They're lucky if they get $10,000. The rest is just eaten up by the bureaucracy, this mammoth organization. There are 30,000 staff members just for Congress, and that's why the bills are 1,400 pages. I put in the interstate highway bill 45 pages. And today, you could read that. Today, there was a time where they couldn't have one copy of a highway bill. They put the box in the well of the Congress. You could kick it, smell it, and you had to vote an hour later because Thanksgiving was coming up. You couldn't read it. No one had read the bill. Now, the problem is that next Thursday is a milestone. $12 trillion debt. This year, not 1.4, but 1.95 the deficit. And how do we know? Because if you go to Treasury Direct on the internet, the Treasury Department issues the real numbers. It was 10 billion, 4 billion in last year, and now it's virtually 12 billion, 1.95 deficit, not 1.4. Now, what they do is they cheat because they take the surplus of Social Security, spend it, it's gone, and they count it as if it exists.
How do they manage that?
They manage that with double bookkeeping, just like crooks have two books for the IRS.
Yeah.
One is the real fake book, which politicians use and the public gets, but the Treasury Department audits because they have to be accurate because they're the ones who control the final books. So the difference between one and the other, for example, Clinton claimed he had a $559 billion surplus. He had a $444 billion deficit, a $1 trillion lie. Now, who found it? The Treasury Department. He was using the Social Security surplus as if the money was really there. But it's gone, all the IOU pieces of paper.
Right.
So basically, it's not only that we have trouble, but that the lies are confusing the people to keep them quiet.
How far in the hole is Social Security, do you figure?
Social Security money stolen as of today is $2.2 trillion.
$2.2 trillion.
Now that money has to be made up elsewhere because the baby boomers won't have it. We have to raise FICA taxes 50% to pay for the baby boomers. Now, if we raise the FICA taxes 50%, the corporations will go broke.
Yes.
It'll be a 22% tax, and the people their paychecks will be diminished.
Well, what are we going to do? This country is right on the brink of bankruptcy. That's what it is. It's bankrupt.
That's right. You see, legally, a country can go bankrupt, but they can be dissolved. We didn't defeat the Soviet Union on the battlefield. They committed suicide.
Yeah.
And that's going to happen to us. Now, how do we change it? We have to understand that politicians are different than you and I. They're not like real people. They're different kind of people. They're egocentric maniacs.
Yeah.
They want publicity. And everyone in the Senate wants to be president of the United States.
Everyone.
He figures if he spends more money, this group will love him, or that group. In my last chapter, I show how to save $600 billion a year in waste. It would take me 1 week, and maybe it'll take the government 10 years, but there's no intention of doing that.
Yes.
The intention is, how much money can we spend to secure this vote or that vote?
Well, that was Roosevelt's mantra, you know, tax and tax, spend and spend.
Now, the best president in our history was Harry Truman. Harry Truman inherited $258 billion World War II debt, and when he left, he paid off 25% of the debt, had a balanced budget. Ike had a balanced budget. It wasn't until 1970 that we had a deficit, and by 1982 we had $1 trillion,
Yes.
and now, only a quarter of a century later, we have $12 trillion. And we're going to have $22 trillion by the end of Obama's 2 terms, and it's going to be $1 trillion a year in paying off China and Japan and the debt and interest.
When do you think the foreign nations are going to say it's all over? We're not going to take your
If I were the Chinese, I would say, you want money? Pay me 10%. Like a loan shark.
Yeah, yeah.
And if we don't have China or Japan to take our debt, who's going to buy the debt?
Nobody.
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 And so when people don't buy the debt, the interest goes up. And so not only is the debt bigger, but the interest is bigger, and that's a spiral and a spiral, and that's the end of the country economically.
Well, it is the end. Well, why doesn't somebody see it? You see it, but I understand the media, the mainstream media won't let you have a voice anymore.
When I did my first book, The Government Racket, I was on Larry King, CBS, Good Morning America. They won't talk to me now. Why? Because they're no longer journalists. They're now allies of the spending Democratic Party. Now, the Republicans did a bad thing, too.
Yeah.
When they came in, George Bush was a great patriot, but he spent like a Democrat.
Every bit of it.
Every bit of it. And as a matter of fact, he increased the debt $4 trillion. Now, that's unconscionable. Why did he do it? I think he figured maybe I'll get liberal votes. Then I'll have both Republicans, but he lost both.
Yes, he did.
He lost both.
I think his core left him at the last election. I mean, the Congress was lost because of that reckless spending.
Yeah. So you had 3 presidents who put us in this thing. Clinton,
Yeah.
Bush, and now the worst,
Obama.
Obama. The country has to wake up, and we need an education in government. We know the sports, we know the Yankees better than we know the Washington. And you can't do that. People have to understand. That's why I was in retirement. I came out to write this book because I was so frustrated with the country that I loved.
How do we stop it? We really, you know...
The people can stop it.
How?
The people can stop it by beginning to understand that you can't live or run a government on the credit card. You know, an interesting thing, the small things. The Department of Defense had $100 million in unused airline tickets that were refundable, and they never refunded it. The IRS had 80 in-house thefts. 12 of them were from previously convicted criminals who they hired. It's like a Marx Brothers movie. It's a madhouse, an absolute madhouse. They gave 500,000 credit cards to the employees to make small government purchases.
Yes.
They used it for trips to Alaska, to pay for closing on their house. One guy bought 2 cars with it. And when they find them, they don't put them in jail. What do? Reprimand them.
Reprimand.
Yeah, it's hard for them to... What happens?
Keep your car, but you get reprimanded.
You get reprimanded. See, the trouble is that the internal workings of the federal government are a madhouse. I've covered Washington for 30 years, and I testified 6 times before the House and the Senate. And each time they applaud me, that's wonderful, we're going to change. They have no intention of changing. These people have one goal in life, get elected. If they have to lie, if they have... They don't steal, but I think it would be cheaper if they stole a few $1 million and left them alone. we would save trillions.
If they just wrote checks to everybody, here's $50,000. It'd be so much cheaper.
And leave us alone.
Yeah.
You know, $65,000 for every poor family in America is unconscionable, because then they would have an income of $80,000, but they don't. Where did the money go? Bureaucracy. And the bureaucracy, I walk through the halls of Congress a lot, and walk through the halls of the agencies. It's an undisciplined organization. It's not that the people are bad people, they just, when you live in a lax community,
yes,
your mind goes lax, you go lax, the discipline disappears, and any moral strength that you used to have is gone. And there's no moral strength in Washington, D.C. It's Sodom and Gomorrah financially.
When they